They say you can't choose your family, but you can choose how many chances you give them. After 15 years in the Air Force, 7 deployments, 2 crash landings, and 1 spinal surgery, I thought I'd earned at least a welcome home. Instead, I got a text. Just one. Don't come home this Christmas. It's better this way. No, how are you? No, we miss you. Just a cold digital sentence that hit harder than any turbulence I'd ever faced in the sky. My name is Elena Parker. And wherever you're watching from, stay with me. Because sometimes the people who should wrap you in warmth during the holidays are the ones who leave you shivering outside the door. I sat alone in my apartment in Eagle Crest, Colorado. Just a one-bedroom rental filled with quiet and blinking dollar store Christmas lights I'd strung across the window. A half-packed duffel bag lay by the couch next to a folder with my discharge papers. I had planned this return for months. I had wanted this. Not because my family ever asked me to come back, but because I thought maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. It wasn't. I reread the message, my throat tightening. My father didn't even sign it, just sent it like a memo to an employee being phased out. I waited. Maybe my mom would follow up. Maybe my little brother Michael would text something dumb like, "Ignore dad, you know how he is." But no. Hours passed. Then a day. Then 2. Silence. It was as if they all agreed I didn't exist anymore. And maybe I should have been used to that. My father never exactly saw me as his daughter, more like an unfortunate detail in the family photo. The pilot, the tomboy, the one who never came home enough to be considered part of things. But I came home when I could. I never missed a birthday card. I called every Thanksgiving, even if I was halfway across the world. And I always sent money. When the business was tanking, when the boiler broke, when Michael's car needed a new transmission, I wired funds without asking. Not once did they ask what it cost me. Not once did they say thank you. So I stared at my phone screen that night, at that stupid little message, and I felt something inside me finally, shatter. I typed back just one word. Understood. Not in the way you say fine and secretly hope they'll call again. No. This was the kind of understood that closes a chapter. Then I did what any veteran does when they've reached the end of a mission. I opened my laptop, canceled my flight, deleted the confirmation email, and poured myself a glass of red wine. I raised it quietly to the empty room and toasted to family. 5 days later, I turned my phone back on. 10 missed calls. 1 from my brother, 1 from my dad, 4 from my mom, and 1 from their lawyer. That was the one that made me sit up. Because by that point, it was already too late. Too late to unsend what they'd sent. Too late to unwrite the letter I had mailed. Too late to undo what I had already set in motion. They thought I'd take it like always. Smile, shrink, swallow the disrespect, and show up anyway. Because that's what Elena always does. But they didn't realize something. I didn't come back as the girl who left. I came home with a new kind of armor. And they were about to learn what happens when the daughter you exiled stops asking for a seat at the table and claims the deed instead. I was 16 the first time my father told me I was a mistake. He didn't say it with those exact words, of course. He said it the way cold men do, through clenched jaws and quiet contempt. It was the night I came home late from school after a flight simulation competition. I was drenched in sweat, holding a second-place trophy like it mattered. He didn't even look up from his newspaper, just muttered, "Didn't think you'd be the type to chase pointless hobbies. At least your brother's learning something useful in business class." That was Frank Parker's love language. Disappointment. He didn't hug. He didn't ask. He didn't celebrate. He just measured everything in wins, in control, in usefulness. And according to him, I wasn't very useful. My mom, Joanne, was the shadow behind his storm. She wasn't cruel, just absent. She flinched before he ever raised his voice. She folded laundry like it was a sacred task and whispered things like, "Don't challenge your father," or, "You know how he gets." And Michael? He was their golden boy. Always agreeable. Always there. If I was wind, Michael was stone. Firm, immovable, loyal to whoever seemed strongest. I enlisted in the Air Force the day after high school graduation. Not out of patriotism. Not because I loved discipline. I left because it was the only way out. My father didn't even come to my swearing-in ceremony. When I graduated basic training, he called to say, just try not to screw it up. Not, I'm proud of you. Not, be safe. Just don't embarrass him. I served 12 years, climbed fast, became one of the youngest women in my unit to pilot an HH-60G Pavehawk. I survived crash landings, evacuation runs under fire, and once a storm over Afghanistan so vicious our blades iced in midair. I made it through all of it. And still, every time I came home, I hoped. Every Christmas, every brief leave. I'd land at Denver International, rent a car, and drive hours just to show up with gifts and some fragile thread of hope. One year, after a 6-month deployment, I came back with a shoulder injury and a bronze commendation. My father asked me to clear out the gutters before I took off my boots. Michael barely looked up from his laptop. Mom smiled nervously and offered me cold tea. I played the good soldier. I gave. I gave. I gave. Birthday calls, anniversary gifts, checks when the furnace broke or the property taxes surged. They took it all without question. Never asked where the money came from. Never asked what the job had cost me. But every year I came back anyway. Because part of me, a stubborn, bruised part, still thought if I proved myself enough, they'd open their arms. That maybe one day I'd walk into that kitchen and hear, "We missed you." This year was supposed to be different. I had finally retired, medically discharged. I'd traded my wings for a quiet future. Maybe a job instructing young pilots, maybe a dog. All I wanted for Christmas was to be welcomed, to bake with Mom, to hear Michael's stories, to maybe, just maybe, get a nod of approval from my father. Instead, I got a text that said, "Don't come home," but they didn't know something. 5 years earlier, during one of my rare leaves, my father had asked me to co-sign something for the family business building. Said it was just paperwork to secure a loan. I was 30, worn out. He said it would make him look stable to the bank. I didn't read it. I signed. Big mistake. For them. Because now, in the middle of my silence, I remembered something they had forgotten. I wasn't just their disappointment anymore. I was their co-owner. And I was about to read the fine print. It started as a distraction. After I read that text, "Don't come home this Christmas," I tried not to spiral. I turned off my phone, lit a cinnamon candle, and opened an old hard drive from my deployment kit, hoping to find pictures from base or maybe a training video. Instead, I found the folder. Parker Holdings, Loan Docs. It had been buried under layers of clutter. Field manuals, mission reports, a PDF copy of my promotion ceremony. But there it was. The contract. Digital. Executed. Signed by Frank Parker. Signed by me. Stamped. Witnessed. Filed. I opened it, pulse steady like I was preparing for a mission. And that's when I saw it. Buried on page 6, in tiny legal font. In the event of primary borrower default, voluntary transfer, or incapacitation, the cosigner assumes controlling interest and financial authority until loan maturity or reassignment. Controlling interest. I blinked, sat back, read it again. He'd needed me on that signature because his credit was too weak. He'd called it a formality, a technical favor. And I, like the desperate fool I was, signed it without hesitation. At the time, I was in uniform, fresh off a medevac mission. He met me at the airport, handed me a pen, said something about helping the family. I would have signed anything. He knew that. And now 5 years later, that signature, forgotten by me, disregarded by him, was the key to everything. Because the business property wasn't just collateral anymore. It was mine. 51% mine. I wasn't just allowed to take control. I was entitled to. I stared at the screen, the glow reflecting off the wine glass in my hand, and a quiet chill filled the room. All this time, he thought he had the upper hand, that I was still that uniformed daughter desperate for approval. He didn't realize that behind the badge, behind the deployments, I'd learned something powerful. How to keep records, how to track assets, how to study terrain. He thought he'd cut me off. But what he'd actually done was hand me the deed to his kingdom. That night, I opened a new document. I typed slowly, carefully, the way I did when reporting casualty counts. Emotionless, precise. To whom it may concern, effective immediately, I will be exercising my controlling interest as co-signer and majority stakeholder of the property located at 143 Devon Street, Centennial, Colorado. All rights, responsibilities, and operations associated with this asset will now fall under my legal management and representation. You will be contacted through counsel. Sincerely, Elena Parker, USF, retired now. I printed it, signed it in black ink, mailed it certified, return receipt requested. Old school, intentional. I wanted them to open it together, to feel it, cold, final, undeniable. Then I went online and booked a cabin. A quiet place up in the Montana wilderness. Snow-covered pines. Firewood stacked at the door. A fridge already stocked with cider and sliced turkey. It would be my first real Christmas. Alone, but on my own terms. 5 days later, I turned on my phone. 10 missed calls, 2 from Michael, 3 from my mom, 1 from my father, and 1 from a name I hadn't seen in years, Edmund Rowe, attorney at law. That's when I knew. The letter had landed. They had read it. And suddenly, I wasn't the daughter they didn't want around. I was the woman who could dismantle everything they had built. With one legally binding signature. And this time, they wouldn't see it coming. Because I wasn't coming home for Christmas. I was coming for control. The thing about legal documents is, they don't care how people feel. They don't flinch, they don't cry, and they don't need anyone's permission to be enforced. I knew my family would be scrambling the moment they read that letter. Not because they feared losing me, no, that ship had sailed years ago, but because they feared losing the building. That property wasn't just bricks and drywall. It was Frank Parker's pride, his legacy, his proof that he'd built something. What he didn't realize was, he built it using me, and now I was calling in the investment. I reached out to Daniel Reese, a veteran friend I'd met during a leadership summit on base in Alaska. After retiring from service, he became a real estate attorney and owned a small property management company in Boulder. Hypothetically, I said over the phone, what happens if a co-signer with majority interest wants to assume full operational control after years of neglect from the borrower? Daniel laughed. Hypothetically? She can do whatever the hell she wants, especially if the borrower defaulted or violated the contract. What if there are tenants or subleases? I asked. As long as they weren't legally filed or approved through the co-owner, they're invalid. You'd be within your rights to suspend activity and reassign usage. I was silent for a beat, then, good. I'm not trying to burn the place down, just reclaim it. Daniel paused. Elena, I say this with love. Don't go soft on people who built their roof on your back and then told you to stay out of the rain. That was the moment I stopped second-guessing myself. I gave Daniel temporary power of attorney for property affairs. He reviewed the documents, verified the contract, and filed the official notice of intent to transfer operational authority. Legally, it was a formality, but emotionally, it was a declaration. The next morning, I booked the cabin in Stillwater Lake, Montana, a 2-bedroom wood lodge nestled in snow miles from the nearest gas station. I'd spend Christmas there. Alone, yes, but not abandoned. Because this time, I wasn't waiting by the phone. I was rewriting the rules. 2 days before Christmas, I turned my phone back on. 10 missed calls, 3 voicemails. Michael, Mom. A message from someone named Edmund Rowe, using words like urgent clarification and unexpected disruption. I didn't call back. Instead, I brewed fresh coffee, curled up by the fire, and listened to the wind brushing against the pine trees. I didn't feel regret. I felt peace. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking to be included. I wasn't begging to come home. I was reminding them that they had made the rules. They were the ones who said I didn't belong. They were the ones who told me to stay away. And now they were learning what it meant to be legally separated from someone they had emotionally discarded long ago. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. Let them stew. Let them panic. Let the lawyer sweat and my father shout and my brother ask dumb questions like, what's going on? I was done being the afterthought. Now, I was the signature at the bottom of the page, and every page from here on out would be mine. The first call I answered came from Michael. His name lit up my screen while I sat by the window of the cabin, steam curling from the mug in my hand. "Elena, what the hell is going on?" he demanded, voice frantic. "Morning to you too," I said calmly. "Don't do that. Don't pretend like this is normal. Dad's going ballistic, Mom's crying nonstop, and I just got a call from some lawyer who says you're taking over the building. What are you doing?" I took a slow sip of coffee. "I'm executing my rights, Mike. You know, those legal rights Dad handed me on a silver platter 5 years ago when he couldn't qualify for that loan alone. Come on, it was just a signature. You didn't even care about that place." "You're right," I said, setting the mug down. "I didn't care. Not until Dad told me in writing to stay away from Christmas. Not until all of you agreed in silence that I wasn't part of the family anymore. That message made it clear. I'm not welcome. But the building? That's a different matter." He paused. I could hear him pacing on the other end, probably in the office I helped save with deployment money. "You're seriously going to kick them out over one text?" "No," I replied softly. "I'm not kicking them out yet." That silence? That was the moment he realized this wasn't a bluff. "Elena, he's our dad." "Yes," I said, voice sharpening. "And for 35 years, he's made it clear that I'm not his daughter. So don't come to me asking for mercy now. I gave him chances. I gave all of you chances. I earned every bit of respect and got none. You're not being fair. And neither were any of you." I cut in. "Not when you needed my paycheck. Not when I called from the other side of the world and begged for 5 minutes of conversation. But now? Now that I have the deed? Now you all remember I exist." The line went quiet. He hung up. No goodbye. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. This time, the voice was cool, polished, and legal. "Miss Parker? Edmund Rowe, counsel for Mr. Frank Parker. I believe you sent a rather disruptive letter this week." I leaned back and crossed my legs. "I did." "Well, I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. These things can be worked out with some cooperation. Perhaps a reassignment of the contract? A buyout?" "There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Rowe," I said, cutting him off. "The contract is valid. I've confirmed with my own legal team, and I'm invoking my controlling interest. Effective immediately." He cleared his throat. "I see. Well, that changes the situation slightly. May I ask what you intend to do?" I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "I'm open to discussion, but only under one condition." "Which is?" "He calls me himself," I said. "Not through you, not through Michael. My father calls me directly and asks." Mr. Rowe didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, it was slower, more careful. "I understand." "Good. You can tell him the message is received, and the terms are now mine." I ended the call. The wind outside howled against the glass, but inside that cabin, I felt nothing but warmth. Not from the fire, from clarity. Let them scramble, let them squirm. They had built a house without me, filled it with their expectations, their tenants, their silence. Now, I was the one knocking on the door. Not to come in, but to tell them who the new owner was. The next call came from Daniel, my property manager. A man of few words, but every one of them meant something. "Elena," he said plainly, "we finished the preliminary inspection on Devon Street." I straightened in the cabin armchair, every nerve in my body going alert. "And?" He exhaled, slow and low. "Cosmetically? Not terrible. Structurally? Leaks in the basement. Unfinished attic renovation that's out of code. Minor mold under 2 windows. And here's the part you're going to love. There are tenants." "Excuse me?" I said, standing up. "Yep, 2 of the 3 upstairs rooms are being sublet. Cash deals, no leases filed. Looks like they've been running it as an unofficial boarding house." I didn't say anything. My mouth had gone dry. He continued. "One of the tenants, a college kid, said he thought it was a student rental. The other one's some traveling nurse. Both say they've been there for months. Rent in cash, paid to your father." I walked over to the window and stared out into the white forest, my fingers numb around the phone. They hadn't just disowned me. They had turned my signature, my name, into profit. They used me. They leveraged my military standing to secure the property. They rented out rooms without telling me, collected cash under the table, and then had the nerve, the unmitigated gall, to tell me I wasn't welcome. "Elena?" Daniel prompted. "I'm here," I whispered. I just needed a second to swallow the insult. There was a pause, then, "What do you want to do?" "I want you to help me write a second letter." This one wouldn't be gentle. No more polite phrasing, no more passive language. That night, I sat by the fire and drafted it myself. Every word a steel blade, sharpened by years of dismissal and emotional starvation. To Frank Parker, Joanne Parker, and any unauthorized tenants at 143 Devon Street, effective January 2nd, you are hereby given formal 30-day notice of management transition and possible termination of residency. Your sublease agreements are unrecognized and invalid. Rent collection is to be suspended immediately. The property is now under legal review for code violations, financial misuse, and unauthorized commercial activity. All further communication must proceed through legal counsel only. Sincerely, Elena Parker, former captain, USAF Majority Legal Stakeholder, 143 Devon Street. I sent the letter to Rose's office. Certified. Same as the first. But this time, I didn't wait. I followed up with the text to Michael. Just 3 words. "Check your mailbox." The response was faster than I expected. 1 hour. Then came the voicemails. Michael. My mother, sobbing. Even my father's voice, angry, desperate, rattled. I didn't listen to any of them. Because there's something every soldier knows. There's a moment after the dust, after the chaos, after the mission, when you feel the ground beneath your boots and realize you made it. That silence, it isn't just peace. It's power. They could scream. They could beg. But I had survived war. Now I had survived them. And they were about to learn. This wasn't their house anymore. It was mine. January 2nd came wrapped in snow and silence. The air was sharp, the sky low and heavy, and as I pulled up in front of 143 Devon Street, the building that once symbolized my exile now stood like a monument to everything I had reclaimed. I didn't come alone. Beside me stood Daniel, clipboard in hand. Behind us, a locksmith bundled in a navy parka waited for the signal. I wore a long black wool coat, polished boots, and around my neck, my old Air Force dog tags. Not for show. For remembrance, for grounding. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a transition. The door flew open before I knocked. Frank Parker stood in the threshold, red-faced, jaw tight, and sweating despite the cold. "What the hell is this circus?" he snapped. I didn't answer. I didn't even stop. I walked past him like wind through a doorway. "My house. My terms," I said calmly. The front hallway was smaller than I remembered. The paint slightly chipped. The smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air. My mother stood at the base of the stairs, clutching a rosary she hadn't touched since my last deployment. Her face was pale, lips trembling. On the couch sat Michael. Pale, still. He didn't even look up. I took a breath, grounding myself. Then I spoke loud and clear. "This is a legal transition of ownership and management. As of this morning, full operational control of this property falls under my authority. You have 30 days to either sign a new formal lease contract under my terms or vacate." My father's voice rose behind me, barking, "You can't do this. This is our home." I turned slowly to face him. "No," I said evenly. "It's my investment. And you defaulted." His eyes widened. I continued, voice hardening. "You couldn't qualify for the loan. So you came to me, a 30-year-old in uniform, and sold me the illusion of family loyalty just long enough to secure the bank's approval. And then, for 5 years, you rented out my property, pocketed cash, and finally told me I wasn't welcome here." He looked like he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. I kept going. "The illegal tenants have been notified. They have 10 days to vacate or I will proceed with a formal trespassing order." Any attempt to interfere with this process, damage the property, or intimidate the management team will result in criminal charges. Behind me, the locksmith stepped forward and began working on the code lock. The old tumblers clacked, and with each turn, I felt something in me unlock too. "Where will we go?" my mother whispered, eyes filling with tears. "This is all we have." I met her gaze. "I don't know, Mom," I said quietly. "Maybe not home for Christmas." Her face crumpled, and the sob she released was so raw I almost stepped back. But I didn't, because this wasn't about punishment. It was about clarity. Michael stood suddenly, as if to defend her. "Elena, this is going too far." I raised a hand. "I don't need words, Michael. I needed them 10 years ago. Now I need boundaries." He sat back down, defeated. As the final code clicked into place and the locksmith nodded at me, I turned to leave. The living room, the one I used to sneak into as a teenager when I couldn't sleep, felt colder than the snow outside. The fireplace was dark. The mantel, once filled with family photos, now held nothing but dust and a chipped ceramic angel. The angel was cracked, like the illusion I had clung to for so many years. I stepped outside, boots crunching through fresh snow. The air was sharp but clean, crisp, honest, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a daughter. I felt like a woman who had returned with more than scars. I came back with a deed. Let them call me cold. I called it survival. January 31st arrived without drama. No angry voicemails, no last-minute visits, no desperate knocks on my door. Just silence, the kind that settles after something breaks, not out of peace, out of understanding. I arrived at 143 Devon Street just after sunrise. A fresh blanket of snow softened the driveway, muting the world in quiet white. 3 parking spots, all empty. The house looked different now, less like a battleground, more like a relic of a life I no longer wanted to crawl back into. I stepped inside with a new key. The locks were changed. The codes reset. The air was cold and still. No photos, no notes, no farewell. Only the echo of my boots against the hardwood floor. I walked slowly from room to room. In Michael's old bedroom, I found a duffel bag tucked in the corner. A faded ski pass was clipped to the side labeled Winter Break, Keystone Resort, a trip I was never invited to. In the living room, I found a deep scratch across the floorboards where the old coffee table used to sit. I had bought that table with my first deployment bonus when I was 19. They said it came from a family friend. Said it was a gift. I ran my fingers along the gouged wood and just stared. Not with anger, but with awareness. Some damage isn't loud. It doesn't scream. It just lingers. I didn't cry. Not even a little. Instead, I walked to the back door, opened it, and let the cold air roll through the house. Let it wash away the years of resentment, the need, the ache. Then I pulled out the paperwork I'd brought with me and set it on the counter. The Monroe Initiative for Female Veterans, a nonprofit I'd filed for last week, in partnership with 2 women I'd once flown with. The house would no longer sit quiet. It would be a haven. A place for women like me, women who served, came home, and were met with silence instead of sanctuary. We would start with transitional housing, then therapy programs, resume coaching, and most of all, community. We called it the Parker House, not to honor the man who once dismissed me, but to reclaim the name that had once buried me. Let it stand now for resilience. A local newspaper caught wind of the story. Veteran reclaims family property, turns it into refuge for others. When the reporter called and asked, "What made you do it?" I didn't mention the text, the sublets, or the silence. I just said, "Because I know what it feels like to come home and be told you don't belong." And that was enough. The first tenant arrived 3 weeks later. A woman named Sophia, fresh out of the Navy. Her sister had cut her off. Her apartment lease had ended. She showed up with nothing but a duffel bag at the bag and eyes that looked too tired for 28. I gave her the same room Michael once slept in. We painted it together. Sage green, new curtains, clean sheets. She cried the first night. Not out of grief, out of disbelief that someone had left a door open for her. And when she said, "Thank you for making space," I nodded. Because that's all I had ever wanted. Now I didn't need their table. I'd built my own house and opened the door wide. Every Christmas now, I drive to 143 Devon Street. I don't knock. I don't wait for anyone to answer. I just step onto the porch, light a single candle, and set it on the windowsill. Not for them. For me. For the girl who once stood in the snow, phone in hand, reading a message that said, "Stay away." That girl isn't waiting anymore. She came back. She stayed. And she made damn sure no one like her would ever be left out in the cold again.